Hi everyone, my name is Janae Cohn, and I'm a contributing author to the Pedagogies of Care collection from the authors of West Virginia University Press's series on teaching and learning in higher education. I'm thrilled to be part of this collection and really excited that you're watching this audio-video supplement to my contribution of an infographic about activities to foster deep reading in digital environment. This video is meant to be a supplement to that infographic to create a stronger connection between how digital reading as a pedagogical practice is a part of fostering a pedagogy of care for our students in higher education. When we think of reading as a behavior that our students engage in as part of a learning activity in our classes, we first might think of the medium of a print book, otherwise known as a codex, that thing that's a bunch of pieces of paper glued together with a binding and a spine. And that's how a lot of our students read when they are on our campuses. They might purchase these books at the bookstore or from our campus library. In a moment when our learning is more distributed and students are accessing their course materials online, reading might not always look like it comes from a printed book. It might look a lot like someone on a laptop or on a dedicated e-reader, or even more likely on their mobile phones. Some students will access their reading entirely in audiobook formats too, making reading not just something visual, but also an auditory experience. According to many surveys of librarians and students and instructors, we often think that reading from print or reading from paper is the best way to improve our memory and our retention and our access to course content. And yet in a moment when we are distributed and may not be able to access printed material, we need to think in diverse ways about how we foster the kinds of reading practices that might be dear to us on print in the digital environments that are necessarily a part of our learning today. My forthcoming book with West Virginia University Press will really tackle more of the studies around those differences between reading on print and on screen. But for the moment, what's worth considering is how we can help students foster habits of mind and practices that will make reading off of digital media effective, meaningful, and deep for them. So I want us to think about reading capaciously and inclusively. It's like the processing and acquiring of new knowledge, whether that's through visual or auditory modes or in digital and print spaces. In a moment when our learning is distributed, and even beyond this moment when our students might still be reading and accessing information in lots of diverse ways, it's important to recenter our goal about why we read, who we're reading for, and what we want students to get out of the activity of reading. And in remote classes in particular, reading might be an even more important part of asynchronous engagements, where they'll be accessing course readings or transcripts from videos or discussion board forums at any time. So we want to make sure that students understand why they're reading in all those spaces and what that might mean to them, and how we might make those reading practices more engaging. And one way I might do that is by reminding students of the conversation they're having with readings. And I like Marianne Wolf's quote about this, that reading is ultimately about an encounter between a reader and another mind that leads to thinking beyond ourselves. And that too, this definition too, is a part of a pedagogy of care. Insofar as assigning readings or helping our students through readings is recentering that conversation, recentering the social interactions and dialogues that make learning so meaningful in the first place. So instead of drawing binaries and thinking about reading between screen and paper or oral and written, or even deep and shallow, fostering critical reading practices through a pedagogy of care perspective might mean turning these verses into ands. What happens to our pedagogy when we understand that deep, critical, thoughtful reading practices can happen on screen and paper, when it can be oral and written? And yes, I've been talking about deep reading here, but some reading practices are okay being shallow. When we skim through materials, scan to find new pieces of information, we need to make space for that as a reading practice too. The more inclusive we can be, the more options that we can give, the more we activate universal design for learning, otherwise known as UDL. And there's another contribution to this collection from Thomas Tobin that talks all about UDL if you want to learn more about that. But the more that we can give our students options in our distributed environment, the more care and compassion we show for the variety of students that we might support. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation about the pedagogies of care, And I hope that this contribution and activities around how you might expand opportunities for reading helps you see ways that you can continue to do the great care and compassionate teaching with your students that I know that you do. Thank you so much for listening.